Hello. We are nearing the end, but we're not there yet. So, we are going to read Chapter 20 of Becoming Naomi Leon by Pam Munoz Ryan. Let's take a deep breath in. Let's exhale. And let's begin. Chapter 20 A Crash of Hippopotami. The day before school started, we arrived at the courthouse too early, which didn't help my jitters. Graham, Owen, and I waited on a bench outside our assigned room. The mediator lady had come to Lemon Tree on Friday, just as we planned, wearing a suit and hugging her clipboard. She'd been nice, but all business, kept asking Owen and me each privately about 1,000,000 questions. Like, what did Graham feed us? How many times a week did we take a bath? Had we ever contracted head lice? Now, sitting in the courthouse and staring down the long hallway with perfectly shined floors, I hoped I had answered correctly. There was no sign of Skyla or Clive. A man approached Graham. "Are you Mary Outlaw?" "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm the clerk. Right this way. The judge will be here in a few minutes." He opened the door and held it while we walked inside. The courtroom did not look like the ones on television, with wood railings and oak chairs and a tall box for witnesses. No, it was a small room with a desk at the front. Built-in seats, like the kinds at the movies, were arranged in 3 short rows. One lone seat was positioned next to the judge's desk. I looked around the room. Posters of children hung on the walls. Teenagers playing basketball. A little boy and girl hugging a very old lady. Children sliding down slides with their hands in the air, and a circle of babies in cute outfits. I guessed it was like those friendly rooms at Children's Hospital. The court wanted the room to feel not so scary when they gave you the really bad news. Skyla walked in at the last minute with Clive, but at first I wasn't sure it was either one of them. Skyla wore a pale pink skirt and a sweater set, nylons, flat pink slip-on shoes, and a strand of pearls. Her hair was natural looking, light brown, and she wore hardly a lick of makeup, except for a bubblegum pink lipstick. Clive's hair had been buzzed short, and as if he was enlisting in the military. He wore slacks and a shirt with a button-down collar. Graham leaned into me. "Well, don't they look like the all-American couple?" I didn't know if Graham was trying to make a joke or if she was as scared as I was. When Skyla saw me and Owen, she waved at us as if nothing was wrong. As if she wasn't trying to do something horrible and mean to our family. "I have missed you so much," she said from across the room. Her voice was so sugar-coated that I wondered who the show was for. The only other person in the room was the clerk, and he wasn't paying a nickel of attention. The judge came in and sat down, and we did the same. Skyla and Clive on one side, and Graham, Owen, and I on the other. Even though the judge looked friendly, with smile wrinkles around her eyes like Fabiola's, as soon as I saw her in that black robe, I shuddered inside. It meant the law, that whatever the judge said would have to be carried out. "Let's get started," she said. "Miss Skyla Jones, I'll hear from you first. I see here you left Naomi and Owen in the care of your grandmother 7 years ago." Skyla said, "Yes, Your Honor, I did leave them with my grandmother after some rather awful circumstances." "And what were those?" "I was getting out of a bad marriage. I didn't have any money, and I needed time to make a life for myself and my children." "So, the separation was Not something you wanted? Oh, no, no mother wants to be separated from her children. Skylar glanced over at us. She looked like an angel. Graham took my hand. Ms. Jones, can you explain what you've been doing the past 7 years? I have had some trouble, Your Honor, but that has all changed. I admit I have been in rehabilitation, but I have recently been successful in completing she looked at Clive, a comprehensive program. Clive nodded and smiled at Skyla. There are doctors' reports about alcohol-induced mental illness, said the judge. Were you going to leave that out? No, of course not. I am on medication and I have not missed one dose. And part of my rehabilitation is to establish a relationship with my children. More than anything, that is what I want. Skyla looked lovingly toward us. I applaud your efforts, Miss Jones, said the judge. You may sit down. I bit my lip. If Skyla had acted like this when she was interviewed, what had the mediator's recommendation been to the judge? Ms. Outlaw, said the judge. Graham stood up. Yes, ma'am. How old are you? I am 69 years old. And are you in good health? Yes, very, said Graham. The judge's voice softened. But the reality is clear, isn't it? You are not a young woman. Yes, ma'am, that is true, but I take good care of myself, and if something happens to me, their father, Santiago Leon, will step forward and help. He wants the children to stay with me, and he hopes to visit them as much as possible. He wrote a letter saying as much. When they heard our father's name, Skyla and Clive put their heads together and started whispering. The judge raised her eyebrows and looked through the file in front of her. Let's see. I here have a notarized letter from Ms. Morimoto, Mr. Marble, both teachers at the children's school, commending you for your dedication to Naomi and Owen. I have a similar letter from Mrs. Maloney, a neighbor, and reports from Naomi's counselor and 2 doctors at Children's Hospital. And the judge put one paper in front of the others and studied it. Here it is, a notarized letter from the children's father. It says he was discouraged from trying to contact the children by Ms. Jones, but has continued to send financial assistance and now wants to establish a visitation schedule to maintain his relationship with them. That's right, said Graham. Ms. Jones, what do you have to say about this? Skylar looked at Clive and nodded, then faced the judge. I was very young and immature when I left the children with my grandmother. I regret many of my actions during that time of my life. And you would be fine with a visitation schedule for your ex-husband? Oh, yes, Your Honor. I only want what's best. That's what I have told the woman the other day when she interviewed me. That's why Naomi especially needs to be with me. She needs her mother, not a great-grandmother, who is so far removed from the contemporary issues of life. That's very good, Miss Jones. The judge gave Skyla a peculiar smile, then looked back at the papers in her hand. I have the recommendation of the mediator before me, but before I make the final decision, I would like to hear from the children. Naomi, would you come up here, please? I stood up and looked at Graham. She patted my arm and pointed to the chair next to the judge's desk. I walked over and sat down facing directly across from Skyla. I couldn't take my eyes off the perfect M of her lips. Naomi, the judge's voice finally got my attention. Look at me, please. I turned toward the black robe. I need to explain something. I am always very hesitant to separate parents and children. I feel they should be together whenever possible, except for unusual circumstances. As long as your mother refrains from alcohol and takes her medication and has a good faith intention of caring for you, I could not, with any good consciousness, with any good conscience, deny your mother her parental rights unless I heard a compelling reason. So, can you give me any reason why you shouldn't be with your mother? I heard the judge's words, but I couldn't believe them. I was going to have to live with Skyla. I wanted to tell the judge everything. I wanted to say that I needed to live with Graham and Owen because I didn't know my mother very well and that she scared me. My mind said the words, but my mouth couldn't form them. With everyone staring at me, a brick wall had sprouted between my words and the world, without a crack of daylight for a whisper to escape. Naomi, if you can't add any different information to the situation. Skyla sat up straight, wiggled in her seat, and squeezed Clive's arm. I closed my eyes and heard my father's words. Be brave, Naomi Leon. I felt a rumbling in my mind, the sound of a bulldozer makes when it's headed toward you. A sensation came over me as if someone unlatched a gate that freed a herd of lunging wild animals. I opened my eyes to find Skyla's gaze drilling into me. Is that what you want, Naomi, to live with your mother? Asked the judge. I looked at Graham and Owen and slowly shook my head. No, I said. A little louder, Naomi, I can't hear you. It was as if a stampede crashed through the wall in front of me. No, I said again, and slowly began telling the story from the beginning. How Graham was a widow and lost her only daughter. How Skyla and Santiago got married and took us to Mexico, and Skyla gave us to Graham so she could find her life. How Santiago loved us, but Skyla wouldn't let him have us. How we lived in avocado acres next to the avocado grove and lemon trees so Owen could have room to be a wild monkey. I kept talking louder. Graham loves us and takes care of us. She's been both our parents, all rolled into one, until we met our father. Lemon Tree is my home. That's where I belong. I don't want to live in Las Vegas to live with Skyla. Skyla said she would hurt Graham. She said something bad might happen to Graham if I didn't go with her to Las Vegas. As if a dam had burst, I couldn't stop the rush of words. I told how Skyla wanted me to be a babysitter for Sapphire, and how she started drinking again, and about the slap, and how there were more where that came from. I said I loved my school and my friend Blanca. I told about my carvings and Children's Hospital, and Owen being an FLK, and how Skyla didn't want him anymore because she thought he was a blem. Then I told about my father, and how we had found him. I told the judge about self-prophecy, and how if you wanted something to happen, you should say it was going to happen over and over and over, and how I'd been thinking everything will be all right. I will always be with Graham and Owen, at least 1,000,000 times since Mexico. I said all that with Skyla and Clive looking right at me. Skyla stood up. Your Honor, she has always had an overactive imagination. I need my little girl and she needs me. We belong together, just Naomi and me. Can't you see that what she's been telling you are just little white lies? Skyla sat down and started weeping and blotting her eyes with a tissue. I swore she was making her eyes red on purpose by pressing too hard. I turned to the judge and said in a very strong voice, I am not lying. Thank you, Naomi, said the judge. You may sit down. The judge looked confused. Miss Jones, there's one issue I need to clarify before I can rule. Do I understand correctly that you only want Naomi? Skyla immediately composed herself. Yes, that's all I want, Your Honor, my daughter. And why don't you want your son? Well, that's not the issue. I'm Naomi's mother, and I have a right, Miss Jones. I will decide the issue. Now, why don't you want your son? Skyla seemed flustered and looked at Clive. Well, when he was born, he had so many problems that I never really connected with him, bonded with him. I only had him 1 year of his life, so he doesn't even remember me, and I don't really remember much about him. Naomi being older and a girl and all, We're more suited in a mother-daughter way, if you know what I mean. So, you have no intention of taking both children away from Mrs. Outlaw, said the judge. Oh, no, Your Honor. Miss Jones, did you relay this information to the mediator during the interview? Well, no, I figured that was my own personal choice. See, Owen's better off in Lemon Tree, and Naomi's better off with me. We should stick together, said Skyla, smiling, and obviously satisfied with her answer. I looked at Owen, who was on the other side of Graham. Graham had her arm around him, and he did not look sad or anything. If he found Skyla's words upsetting, there was enough tape plastered across his shirt to hold him together. Well then, said the judge, I don't need to take additional time to consider the case. I am ready to rule. I rarely withhold parental rights, and the mediator did recommend that the children live with their mother, but I believe she did not understand the issue in its entirety, especially since Miss Jones was not forthcoming. I am extremely hesitant to separate siblings who have lived together their entire lives. That is something I will not do, especially when there are loving, attentive, and responsible relatives to act as their caregivers, such as Mrs. Outlaw and the father, who both clearly want these children. Since Miss Jones has established her preference to this court, which is clearly not in the best interests of Naomi and Owen, I grant guardianship to Mrs. Outlaw. Ms. Jones, we can set up a supervised visitation schedule for you if you like to visit both of your children. The judge pounded the gavel. This hearing is over. Skyla looked confused. Clive grabbed her hand, and they hurried out of the courtroom. He never looked back, but Skyla did. She raised her free hand and gave us a weak smile and a little wave of her fingers before Clive pulled her out the door. Let's go, said Graham, wrapping an arm around each of us. She drove us toward home. We were almost to Avocado Acres when Graham turned right instead of left at the corner. That is the end of chapter 20. I will see you back here for the last chapter.